Howdy folks, welcome to Tiny Tent Show, episode number 37. Tonight is a night of stories, specifically the stories of Kevin Kling. Kevin Kling is an author, a playwright, and a teller of tales. His work has been performed and received all over the world in many different formats. And of course, it has been performed and well received here beneath the canvas of our very own Lake Superior Big Top Chautauqua. I spent some time also, as you'll see, interviewing Kevin. It's not really an interview, it's a conversation. And we were interrupted twice. The first time we were interrupted by crummy internet. That's nothing new, that happens all the time. But the second interruption, so Kevin's a storyteller, so when the second interruption occurred, the manner in which it occurred, I thought, oh, this is a bit. This is Kevin doing a thing. And it turns out it wasn't at all. You'll see. I think you'll enjoy it. Thanks for tuning in. We continue to do these Tiny Tent shows, and we will until we can sell tickets to the real deal. We can use support. The folks behind the scenes, always mention them, because you're seeing me running my yapper, and we always have our guests. But there are so many folks behind the scenes putting the shows together, putting shows together for next year, for when we hope we can return to the real world. Those folks have not stopped working. So we are very grateful for your support, past, present, and future. And if you're able to dig in and put a little something in the virtual tip jar that's up right now, we would very much welcome that. If you're able to contact the Lake Superior Big Top Chautauqua offices and make a donation of a more formal sort, that is also an option. And also, please rebroadcast these shows by sharing them on your social media channels. Kevin Kling is one of those people. He can tell a story from any stage and in any setting. And for my money, he makes me feel like I'm eavesdropping down at the cafe or in the implement store of my youth down there where the farmers should sit around and shoot dice and drink coffee and lie to each other. Or he sounds like he's a guy, telling a fish story down to the bait shop. And yet, of course, his work is woven with art and feeling and heart. And so tonight, he's not coming to us from a big fancy stage, nor is he coming to us from the bait shop. He's coming to us from his own living room, directly into yours. Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Kling.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Tiny Tent. Tonight, they're letting me take the wheel. I figured our route out, and it looks pretty good. There's some mountain passes, a couple of hairpin turns, few long stretches, but all in all, pretty good. Well, you know what they say. There's the trip you plan, and then there's the trip you take. So we'll see how it goes. But joining me, because we all know that a great trip needs great tunes, I've got Ed Willett. Thank you very much, Ed. So everybody, use the restroom if you need to, because I'm not pulling over. Get a snack, get something to drink. Adult beverages encouraged. Because I want to start out with the word Hygge. It's a Danish word, Hygge, and it means comfort or sense of well-being. Can you say it along with me? Hygge. Now you got to do that Norwegian kind of, yeah, you got it? Hygge. No, you're not even trying. Come on, Hygge. Come on. You remember where you parked, I hope, and your family. You're not going to embarrass yourself in front of them by now. Come on. Hygge. Very good. Hygge. Okay, now it's one thing to say it, but it's another thing to actually do it. I mean, you can't just go to Walmart and buy a candle with a puppy on it and hope to get it. No, puppy's going to help, but it's not going to get you there. So I'm going to start you out simple. Dry socks. That's right, dry socks. It's those kind of dry socks after you've been outside and you've been sledding or you've been in a snowball fight and you come in and you take off your boots and you pull off the Wonder Bread bags that didn't even keep your feet dry anyway, and you put on dry socks. Oh man, the best feeling. And every socks after that are going to be those dry socks. Like cocoa is always going to come from my grandmother's kitchen with the smell of pies and cookies and greens. She'd say, a little pinch of sugar in everything. And that advice went way beyond cooking. And then at night, going to bed and hearing the muffled sounds of my parents' laughter in the room next door. Oh man, the best way to fall asleep. And dry socks, right? Did I mention dry socks? Ah, that sense of hygge. And I think of my dad outside starting the car on those nights when the stars seem to sit in your lap and the car, or even worse, click. Oh, and he'd be so mad. And then he'd start calling the car names like, come on, honey, come on, baby, words of encouragement, trying to get it to go, come on, you can do it, you can do it. And then he'd revert to prayer, please, I'll be a better person, I'll be a better dad, I'll change my ways. And then, I did it, never mind, God, I got it. And off we'd go. And I wondered, would my dad know the joy of that moment without all the losses? I mean, would we know about the stars without the darkness? Would we know about warmth without cold? And really, we only grieve as deeply as we can love. You need both things. And as I stare into the fire, I just let my mind go. And my mind says, you all take it from here. And my body delights in the flames as the spirit joins in, and the two of them dance to the flickering flames as my mind steps back and watches like a proud parent. It is just a matter of letting go of agendas, of committee meetings, of cold linoleum. Let go and welcome in the warmth and the wonder and the gratitude. And in the spirit of hygge, welcome the tiny tent. Some of my favorite literature happens at this time of year. Of course, A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. I love that. A Christmas Story, that movie was made of this story by Gene Shepard. In fact, his voice is the lead character in the voiceovers. There's A Christmas Memory. This is one of my absolute favorite stories by Truman Capote about he and his aunt mailing out fruitcakes. There's Dylan Thomas's A Child's Christmas in Wales with the most beautiful beginning where he doesn't know whether he was 12 and it snowed for 6 days and 6 nights, or he was 6 and it snowed for 12 days and 12 nights. And that is absolutely one of my most favorite stories. And like Dylan Thomas, I don't remember either. A lot of times when I ask my memory to serve me, it doesn't always bring what I ordered, but I figured it's probably what I really wanted anyway. So like Dylan Thomas right now, I reach down into the snow and I pull up whatever I can find. And there it is, my uncle and aunt's farmhouse. See, I come from farmers, 4 generations of people that were never altitude or seasick. My uncle and aunt's farm, it was less than a mile from where the state surveying company found the highest elevation in the county. Well, then a farmer wrote in that owned the land and he said, no, that's where he'd been piling sod up for all these years, but the county didn't change it. Like most farmers at the time, their farmhouse, in the front of it is a door that sits 6 feet off the ground. And that's because they bought their farmhouse from Sears. And Sears thought that they would put a porch and a stairway. But my uncle and aunt didn't want a porch and a stairway. They didn't even want a front door. So there it hangs, 6 feet in the air. And on the inside is my uncle's favorite chair that sits in front of the door. Early on, I remember in their kitchen, there was a hand pump for water and an outhouse out back. And there was an extension cord that ran out there. And in the outhouse was a heater, a light, and a radio. And you'd plug it in 15 minutes before you went out there. Oh, they finally did get a septic system one year for their anniversary. They had 2 cats. One cat you could pet, and the other cat you couldn't, or you'd get what you deserved. And there was always the cousin that said, oh, I can tell the 2 apart, and then they'd get what they deserved. In the kitchen of the farmhouse, there was a drawer, and it never would open, and that's because somebody put a spatula away in there sideways one time. Oh, my aunt had a glass eye she kept in her purse. She didn't need it, her eyes were fine, but she kept this glass eye in case any of us misbehaved, my brother, my cousins, or I, and she'd say, don't make me take out the glass eye. And then we'd stop. Nobody ever saw the glass eye because, man, you behaved before she dragged it out. You have to watch where you step in my uncle and aunt's house, because when you go down the stairs to the basement, my uncle keeps his beer on the stairs because it's the perfect temperature. In the summer, it's down on the 7th step, and in the winter, it's up on the 2nd step. Those are the stairs that my aunt uses to go down into the pantry. There's this big pantry. She said she always keeps peaches there. And that's because sometimes she'll go down in the basement and forget why she's there. And she'll know she can grab a can of peaches, come to the top and say, I found them. In the front yard is an old tractor. And this tractor's been there before I was born. In fact, there's an oak tree growing up through the middle. It's a full-grown oak right up through the middle of this tractor. And my uncle said one time an antique salesman was driving by from LA and he saw the tractor and he said, you know, that's worth a lot. Do you want to sell it? And my uncle told him, no, I'm thinking about fixing it up. There's a family story about when my dad accidentally shot my uncle with a 20 gauge shotgun. My uncle was only 3 years old. My dad was a teenager and he was cleaning the gun and it went off, and my grandmother would still shake when she'd talk about pulling those BBs out of my little uncle's screaming body. And she said when she hung his overalls on the clothesline where the sun shone through, she could see rays of sun through the BB holes of those overalls. In the back was a small pond behind the sheds and the barns. And I once saw my uncle steer a canoe around that pond without putting his paddle in the water. He just sat there in his overalls, white shirt, straw hat, with his arms folded as the canoe made a perfect arc in a circle. I still don't know how he did it, and I'm amazed to it to this day. My uncle and aunt are long gone. And whenever we go back there, we try to find their house, but we can't find it. And it's quite possible we're looking in the wrong place, even though we remember everything about that house in perfect detail. I'm thinking maybe that's how memories work. welcome to Culture Corner. This is the segment of the show where we study poetry and literature, some of the more couth and highbrow elements of our society. I also happen to like Culture Corner because we share the same initials. This week's offering is a poem called The Ballad of Ron Huber. Up north, where the Snake and the Red River flow, up where they use real carp in their carpaccio, there lived an angler who honestly thought there wasn't a fish that couldn't be caught. Now his grandpa got the timber and his dad the iron ore, but lurking in the shadows of the glaciers lived a creature named Thor. Down deep were the prehistoric traffic, out of the pages of National Geographic, 25 feet from tip to tail, 700 pounds of muscle and scale, terrible as a twister, crazy as a loon, crusty as Hormel chili on a daredevil spoon. Thor's name, it was said, went back to the day when he bested Eric the Red. 45 lures adorned his chin, a lantern on his head for vision, old as the world's oldest profession, if by that you mean fishing. So Ron set up his shack where the ice was thin. It was cold as an Eskimo's ex-wife's grin, and the radio said, remember the rule of thumb, if you're in pain, you won't succumb. But if you're happy and the world seems fine, that's hypothermia talking, you don't have much time. So Ron turned on his stove and hitched up his pants, hooked up a lure and got ready to dance. Now this lure was guaranteed to incite, entice, induce appetite, send the pious to riots, the cringing to binging. It was powered by a 3.5 horse Briggs & Stratton engine. It was guaranteed to draw the poor fellow like a moth to the flame, like a Lutheran to Jello. So Ron hooked up the lure and gave it a kiss for luck, and then he went out for a beer in his truck, when all of a sudden, like a shotgun blast, he heard the line running fast. All right, said Ron, I'll let him run, figuring he'd tire him out, son. And as he did, thoughts entered Ron's brain. Hey, maybe he'd fix up the basement, put a piece of carpet over the oil stain. He could find his biological parents, get his basset hound trained. All the thoughts that he thought as that big fish ran. Then finally, that's enough, said Ron. Time to put you in the pan. And with that, he set the hook. The handle fried, the spool cooked. Any other line would have snapped right then. But Ron had wisely invested in True Test Super XXX 100 monofilament line. Using NASA engineering and a patented design, it was guaranteed to give the angler perfect pitch. It would even pull your Winnebago out of the ditch. There was nothing quite so fine as True Test Super XXX 100 monofilament line. So now the fight was on between these two giants, one using strength and cunning, the other the wonder of science. And for days, weeks it went on, until the fish took a notion to suddenly take a lateral motion. And like a knife through hot butter, it cut through the ice. Like a chainsaw gone crazy, it started to slice. It cut the shack in two, and if that wasn't bad luck, circled his pickup and sank his new truck. That's all right, said Ron. You can keep the shack, the pickup too, but I'm not letting go of you. And with that, he hung tight onto Thor, when suddenly the chair that was bolted to the floor tore loose and pulled Ron across the lake like a sleigh ride from Hades, a bearded Cleopatra in flannel on a frozen Euphrates. Now when word got out, from the Four Corners people ran. There was an angry animal rights group from San Francisco, a tour bus from Japan. There was all kinds of cops and law enforcement. True Test sent a chopper for an endorsement. And when it hovered, written from above, it said, abandon all hope, from Thor with love. You got nowhere to run except the obituary, said Ron, when the fish turned his snout toward a tributary that went up through the Snake and into the Red, through Hudson Bay, where it fed into the Atlantic and over the horizon. And that's the last of Ron that town has laid eyes on. Oh, there have been some sightings from outposts and stations. More than one cruise ship patron said, yeah, it made our vacation. But his final words were all that remained. Tell the wife to get a piece of carpet for over the oil stain. So be careful, young anglers, in what you fish for. Be careful, everyone, in what you wish for, because some things break, but others last with time. like super triple X 100 monofilament line. So with that, I'd like to wish you all a good night, except for you anglers. To you, a good fight. Now this is the time of year we're used to going to dance recitals and orchestras and band concerts. I remember a few years back, my niece was in a concert. She was 6 years old. It was a Suzuki method. So she was on stage with 4 other girls and they were playing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star and their little violins. And I remember they just started into it and my niece's bow of her violin got caught in the girl's hair next to her. But my niece didn't stop. She kept muscling her way through it and the little girl's head was going back and forth. And they made it through the whole thing. And afterwards, people were telling my niece, you know, you really got what it takes to be a professional musician. I remember when I was a kid, I could tell that art was trying to burst out of people's bodies. And you could tell what kind of artist they would be by how the art left their body. Like a painter's hand was always moving. A singer's breath took on the rhythms of the world. Oh, but a dancer, oh man, a dancer's whole body got to move. Now, our school held 2 assemblies every year. One was a visit from NASA, where an aerospace engineer arrived and told of the wonders of space travel, highlighting the event by dipping a grape into liquid nitrogen and then smashing it with a hammer. This swayed many toward the space program. The second event was called the Snow Princess, and it was a dance event. Now, I'd seen dance on TV, but I never thought it was real because they looked too perfect. But then the Snow Princess came to school and she danced up and down the aisles. And as she spun past me, I noticed dark leg hairs poking out of her white tights. I mean, this wasn't perfect. This was real and a modern woman. That NASA guy came back every year, but we never saw that Snow Princess again. But she had already awakened in me a yearning that would not quiet. Now, our school did not encourage dance. So I took trumpet last chair. And every year, the band director would have to have a heart-to-heart talk with me. He'd say, Kevin, you know, there's other avenues of expression you might want to try. I'd say, no. He'd say, Kevin, you can't stay in the band. I'd say, oh, I can't join choir. I'm tone deaf. Yeah, I know. So I'd cry and cry, and he'd leave me in the band, last chair and trumpet. And you know, but I love that because last chair and trumpet, I mean, it's almost all rests. It'd be like a number 37 with a rest after, which meant you had 37 measures of rest, which was usually followed by a repeat sign, which meant 37 more. I'd go home and practice counting. I got good at it. It was the actual notes that gave me the problem. See, my hunt and peck method of finding the pitch was met with some unwanted stares. But I wasn't the only one. I mean, look, there was a clarinet player, and every once in a while, a shriek would come out. I mean, it sounded like it was from the bowels of hell. She'd even hold her instrument away, like, and wait for it to leave. Or there was a trombone player, and he always sounded like he was trying to tune a radiator. I have to admit, though, I was most of the problem. I mean, I would finish a song with the band, and I always had a little extra music left over, or sometimes I would finish and the band would keep going, and I'd pick up my horn and pretend I had more to do. About one time, we were playing the Hogan's Heroes March, and I finished at the same time as the band. I mean, that was a miracle. But then the band director said, very good, band, and now we'll play the Hogan's Heroes March. What? I remember one day, the band director gets up in front of the entire band, and he says, all right, kids, this year we're going to have a holiday concert. Oh, we all exchanged worried looks. He said, but don't worry, we can do it. I know we can. Listen to Kim Feller, first chair. She can play all the notes. Just stick with her. And he said, besides, we have over a week to rehearse. I thought, oh man, over a week to rehearse with Kim Feller? We got this thing nailed. We're going to get all the notes and then some. So we brought home these mimeograph sheets saying when the band concert was, and I gave it to my mom, and she looked at it like it was the water bill, and she just stared at it. And my dad comes home, and my mom says, we're going to this concert. And my dad says, no, I got something to do. And while he tried to think of what that was, my mom says, you're going. She says, it even says here on the program that it's only an hour long. I thought, why'd they put that on the program? It's only an hour long. Besides, when we were leaving that day, the band director said, now kids, we will be joined by the orchestra and the choir. So instead of 1 hour, it's going to be a 3-hour concert. I thought, should I tell my mom and dad? No, let them be surprised. They're going to feel so lucky. 35 years later, I get a phone call, and it's from Lise Holton at the Minnesota Dance Theater, and they want me to be in the Nutcracker. I'm so excited that without even thinking, I say yes. I don't know if you know the story of the Nutcracker. It's written by E.T.A. Hoffman. I mean, this thing, it makes Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland look like nonfiction. I mean, I did some wild stuff in the 70s, but I never even got close to this story of the Nutcracker. Okay, it starts out with this party at this judge's house, and his daughter Marie is given a gift by her godfather, a nutcracker. Well, her brother Fritz immediately breaks it. Okay, so far so good. Well, then that night the tree grows, and all of a sudden all these mice come to life and these snowflakes, and Marie and the Nutcracker dance a dance, and then they're met with a pas de deux by a sugar plum fairy and a cavalier who dance another dance. I mean, it is psychological, it is pathological, it is psychotic, it is adolescence, it is a moral diatribe on the Gilded Age, but Tchaikovsky wrote the music, so everyone does it. It's amazing. So the next day, I go to the dance store and I say, okay, I need shoes and tights. She says, all right. I said, because I am in the Nutcracker. She goes, oh, which one? I go, what do you mean, which one? She goes, well, there's one at her church. St. Paul is doing one. Her children's grade school is doing one. And then I find out there's Nutcrackers all over town. I mean, the sanitation department, the Humane Society, the Raptor Center, the Curling Club, everybody is doing a version of the Nutcracker. And I go, well, I'm in the one at Minnesota Dance Theater. Ooh la la, she said, I've actually even heard of that one. So she gets my tights and she gets my shoes, and I take them home and I put my gear on and I look in the mirror. Oh, it is not good. My body is not cut out for dance. In fact, the only mirror I ever looked in that made my body normal was in the Farmhouse at the state fair. I mean, my knees, as it's been told to me, look like I'm smuggling walnuts. And my body, a usual dancer's body is like an exclamation point. My body is like a question mark. So when I walk in, I'm not like, I'm here. I'm like, I'm here? So I think, man, I got to do something here. And I find out that I'm playing Madame Bombonier and the judge, the guy who's running the whole party. Well, Madame Bombonier is going to be a blast. She's this woman on stilts, and she has a high wig and makeup, and she laughs really loud, and mouse children run from under her skirt. I'm going to nail that one. I know that. But the judge, man, this is a real guy, and I'm going to be up there with dance members from the Joffrey Ballet and ABT, and I'm going to be standing there with my walnuts. And I'm thinking, okay, I got to do something here. So I learned in college that if you're not doing well in a part, make a mustache so everyone's looking at that. I mean, have an inverse relationship to your talent be the size of the mustache. So I build this mustache that looks like I got a dog sitting on my lip. I mean, nobody is going to be looking at my knees. So we do the concert, and I mean, this thing goes off without a hitch. Okay, I stepped on a mouse child, but they got away. They were all right. They were fine later. Uh, but this judge, I thought, man, I've nailed it. And so we're standing in line after the concert, and we're in this big long line, and everyone is coming through and telling everyone, oh, what a beautiful job. Oh, you were so marvelous. Oh, you were just wonderful. And this woman gets to me and she says, oh, and you, what a good sport. A good sport. And then I realized, I'm not doing a very good job. And then it got to the point I didn't even want to go back on stage. And I thought, I got to do something here. So I asked the little kid playing Fritz, this little 7-year-old kid. I said, he's already a superstar. I mean, this guy was going to be a hero. And so I say, Fritz, how do you do it? And you get out there and you blow people away. And this little kid tells me, he says, well, I put a diamond on my chest. And when I dance, I shine that diamond to the back of the room. And so that's what I did. From then on, I put a diamond on my chest and I let it shine to the back of the room. And I've used that advice ever since. And I don't think I got any better, but man, I went back to loving dance. My favorite memory, though, was when the principal dancers from the Joffrey or the ABT would take the stage. All the mouse children would crowd into those fly wings, into the sides, into the darkness, and those little mouse faces looking up at those principal dancers, that magical look on their face, and I could tell that they would rather be here than smash a grape dipped into liquid nitrogen any day.
Hey folks, I had a chance to visit with Kevin, as I mentioned in the introduction, and the interview was wide-ranging and delightful. For my part, I enjoyed it, just learning from Kevin and hearing about his background and his thoughts about performing and storytelling. But also, as I mentioned, there were a couple of interruptions as well. I hope you enjoy. Well, I want to welcome Kevin King. And Kevin, I think the best place to start is just how did you wind up being associated with the Lake Superior Big Top Chautauqua?
Oh man! Oh, you started with the hard one. Uh, no, I'm sure it goes back to my mom moved up there. What was it, 30 years at least ago, and she kept talking about the Big Top, and I finally went and saw one of the shows with the whole gang in it. The first one I saw was one with the whole troupe singing and playing, and it was just incredible. And then over the years, I just kept going, and then ended up being in a couple, and that was a hoot. Yeah. So I'm a fan from way back. I go back at least 2/10.
Oh, that's a great way of putting it. I go back 2/10. Yeah, I think I like your story. You kind of got caught in the slipstream is what happened. I mean, it's same as me. I used to just buy a ticket and see a show up there. And then one time I was standing around and someone asked if I'd tell a story up on the stage there. And then one thing leads to another and you got some history. So you said you performed in a couple of the original shows, and then just tell folks a little bit about your background in general.
Grew up, came from Missouri, and then grew up here in Osseo, Minnesota. And yeah, it was great. It was, one of those kind of a small town. The city hadn't come out and closed it yet. So it was really a small town upbringing, which I really loved. I mean, yeah, we called, what was it? Duct tape was called Osseo Chrome because it held all our cars together. Is that kind of upbringing?
Well, folks, I'm not sure exactly where you're picking up on this interview. I was talking to Kevin and we got cut off. Cheryl Leah refers to bad rural internet as hinternet, and that's what we've got here. And I think we just got cut off thanks to my internet. So I've run to a very picturesque background here, as you can see, where the signal is a little stronger, and Kevin and I are going to try to continue our discussion. Kevin, when we got cut off, you mentioned that you're from Osseo, Minnesota, or you spent time there, and I love that reference because I live about 9 miles from Osseo, Wisconsin, And I have a buddy who likes to buy equipment on Craigslist. And I remember one day I saw him in town and I said, "What are you up to?" He goes, "Well, I got to make a little trip." I said, "Well, why is that?" He said, "Because I bought a snowplow and I thought I was buying it in Osseo, Wisconsin, but I bought it in Osseo, Minnesota." So he had to make a little side trip over there to Minnesota.
Yeah. Well, you guys have the pie shop, right?
Yeah, the North
Isn't it?
Key Nook.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that's yeah, you got that. That's what I remember. Yeah, yeah. We
As
have the firehouse.
Bill Murray would say, "So we got that going for us."
Yeah.
So you had, when we got cut off, you were just explaining to me that you were mentioning Gustavus Adolphus and the softball team.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I went to Gustavus Adolphus, God Save All of Us College. And yeah, I was a theater major because the only thing easier was a theater minor. And actually, I loved it. It was a great theater department. And there were 4 theater majors when I graduated. So that was it. So it was one of those really great situations of, just, man, I thank my stars that I had a liberal arts education. It really fit right with me. And then, yeah, when I got out, I got a job at the Playwrights Center, which, I mean, it couldn't have been better fortune. There's no place like it in the country where they, foster new works. And I didn't even really, I'd done a little bit of writing at that time, but once I fell into there, oh man, it was like, I was surrounded by these brilliant writers. And I was saying our softball team was kind of the who's who of American theater for a while. We had August Wilson on our team, and since he was from Pittsburgh, he'd always wear a Pittsburgh Pirate uniform. He was standing out there with these like kind of loser playwrights, these skinny pencil-armed playwrights, and there he was just smashing it over the fence. And so that couldn't have been better. And then, yeah, being around Minnesota and Guthrie Theater right there and everything. But then one day I was in a kitchen blabbing away, telling stories, and there was a theater producer in there, and I didn't know it. And she goes, "Do you want to do that on stage?" And I said, "What?" And she goes, "Just what you did in the kitchen. I want to put you in next season." And I go, "Yeah." So I got in her next season with, oddly enough, here's with Jim Stoll, who is a ranger up on Raspberry Island up there in the Apostle Islands. Jim and I were in the first storytelling shows together, both of us. And we went on, both of us, to have careers in it. But we shared a stage together, and he taught me so much. I mean, what a brilliant teller. So then it just then it launched, and before I know it, I was all over the world. So, yeah, it's.
What about at this point, as a veteran of performing, how does it feel different when you take the stage now as opposed to back in those early days? And what is the same?
The same as I'm just as nervous before I go on. That has not changed iota. The things that are different is when I'm out there, I know when not to panic, which is a really big thing. I mean, because if you forget a line, which we all do, or forget where we are, or forget what's going on, if you go looking for it, you're never going to find it. But if you wait there, it's like a horse. It'll wonder what you're doing and come up to you. And so I've learned just that it's like jazz. Nothing goes wrong. It just becomes something else. And so now, like most people had that, what they call the actor's nightmare, where they don't know what they're going to say on stage, and it's a nightmare. To me, that's daily. It's if I have that dream, it's not a nightmare. It's a dream, because and that is. So being on stage, knowing in this form that the phone will ring. I mean, now I've gone 40 years in this business with not knowing what I'm going to do month to month. And, it's just the phone has always somehow, you always eke out a living. No path is the same. I remember reading the Knights of the Round Table of Arthur Legend that Percival, the reason he found the Holy Grail was because whenever he would enter a forest, he never took a path that was already taken because he knew the Grail hadn't been found yet, so that path wasn't going to work. So I've kind of lived as an artist by that. rule.
I'm fascinated by that because I just had a similar or parallel discussion with another friend of mine. And let me preface this by saying I don't in any way mean to, well, certainly not make light, but to minimize the difficulties so many people are facing right now. And it was true with our little family. I mean, we saw a huge chunk of our income evaporate when we couldn't go on the road anymore. But the thing that I just related to that you spoke about is the one advantage that we have is we've never known where the next paycheck is coming from. And you almost learn, we were talking about it in terms of surfing, which I've never done. And if I ever try it, we should sell tickets. But you're just surfing. I always talked in terms of a horizon. I've never made it. It's just the horizon has had a different distance from day to day. And sometimes the horizon is out there and you go, okay, well, we're going to hang in there for a couple of months. And then other times it gets closer. So I do relate to that. Oddly enough, that very uncertain way of making a living can come to serve you in times like this.
It is. And and even it is so in me and so deep now. Yeah, when I had a year's worth of work that went right away in March, that was just gone.
Same.
And I never panicked, and I still don't know why. It's
see, I love that you said that too, because some people say, well, how do you do it? And I say, well, it doesn't pay to think about it much.
No. This is, there's that great character in Shakespeare in Love. Geoffrey Rush plays this theater owner, and everything's going wrong. Things are bursting into flames, everything's falling, and he's just smiling. And the guy goes, you're about ready to lose your shirt. Why are you smiling? He goes, oh, it'll come together. It always does. And it's like, and yeah, like you said, I don't want to make light of it because it doesn't always come together. But I have to say it's that when you have led your life hand to mouth, it is really, it does build just a different kind of way of you're either always in a state of panic or you never are. I don't know which it is.
Well, and to circle back to what you mentioned about still being nervous, I call it good nervous,
Yeah.
And then the idea too of messing up live, and how over time you still would prefer not to mess up, but over time you learn, well, that's just part of the gig. And two things came to mind. One, I often quote a musician friend of mine who told me a long time ago, he said, just smile and keep strumming.
Yep.
And then I was thinking in terms too of storytelling, because I do a little bit of it, and I don't really do punchline stuff. I mean, there are some payoffs, I guess, at the end of stories, but it's not really set jokes. But there are certain stories, and you do them too, where it does require that you hit 2 or 3 points along the way to set up the finish. And I don't know what the jargon is or the lexicon just to break this down academically, but I just know that I got to hit 2 or 3 things on the way in order to get the payoff. And I've often, more than once, been at thing 3 and realized I never did thing 1.
Yeah.
You get this little surge of adrenaline, but you also go, okay, all right, what are we going to do? And in my mind, I see those 2 points. And then, like you said about the horse, I just go for this walk, and you find your way. And there's nothing more rewarding than just tossing in item number 1 offhandedly, and the audience having no idea that you've just saved yourself.
Yeah.
Listening to the end. And I'm sure you have similar experience.
Or you're like, did I say that? Yeah,
That's good.
But you're like, you know what though? And you brought something up because I've seen your work. I'm a big fan. I just love your work. And the one thing that I know that we do share in that same way is that where someone, a comic or somebody that's funny, well, they're aiming for the joke. The joke is what they're after. But when you're a storyteller, a joke opens a door. A joke isn't the close of the door. It's like something funny will open someone's heart. And a storyteller isn't going to waste that. We don't wait. It's like, that's not what we're here for. We're here to what is beyond that. The humor is what connects us. and then the open heart is then what we can, now let's get to something. So
beautiful. I'm glad you said that, because I've always been a little less poetic about it. I've always said that in the storytelling that I learned, which was at the implement store or under the hay wagon in the shade on your break at 2:30 from stacking bales and listen to the old timers.
yeah,
Humor where I come from was a form of self-deprecation too.
yes.
So if you went on and on about something, you better make a joke at some point to let everybody know that you weren't taking yourself that seriously. And I do think that that's true, and that is a form of letting the audience know, look, I don't, what do I know? But what you said was even more beautiful, that humor is where the love comes in and relating to people. That's lovely.
No, those guys, I mean, I'm with you. Those guys that would sit there and they would just delight in a story where everything went wrong for them. I mean, that was and those guys were just, oh man. And that was the whole thing, is that you had to have that series of things that went wrong. I mean, that's the whole, and I grew up with that same thing. It's, it's like, God, one of my favorite storytellers, Bill Lepp, always says, he goes, I'm never the hero in my story. He says, I might be the main character.
This happened last night. And again, I'm relating to you about how when things go wrong, we're so lucky in tough times, because even when a minor thing goes wrong, as opposed to a pandemic, when a minor thing goes wrong, you go, oh, I can use this. And last night I had a song I had written and recorded with some friends, and I was sharing it with my family for the first time. And my wife and younger daughter were downstairs, so we were playing it. And my older daughter, who's 20, came downstairs. She'd been doing something completely different. And she said, what is this heinous music you're listening to? And my immediate thought was, as an artiste, I could have been my beloved child. But I immediately thought, that's the column for this week, right?
Yeah.
And that, furthermore, I was like, I can't wait to tell that story on stage, probably at a music show, right? You're gonna go, well, here's a song. And
oh, that's great.
and so lovely that you mentioned that, yeah, the best thing that can happen is for something to go wrong. You're gonna.
That is.
Yeah.
I gotta be right back. Is that okay?
Yeah.
I put something on the stove. I'm not even kidding. When you said, I just smelled something burning. I'll be right back, okay? Like in 2 seconds. Oh, God.
Well, folks, it's not live, but it feels live, doesn't it? Our guy, Abe does such a great job of putting these shows together. And Abe, I don't know what you're going to do with this, but we've really given you a rough hot dish today, but there's a little bit of joy in watching Kevin. I mean, unless if I see flames or if he doesn't come back within, let's give him 5 minutes. I don't see flames. I don't see smoke. I'm already doing the second half of the interview, as you can see, from a less than optimal spot, just because I had to get close enough to the internet to where the hamster on the wheel could actually keep it going. And now, let me look.
Oh, God. Okay. Well, we're not having spaghetti tonight.
Well, some night when things get better, and Kevin, you're on stage at the big top, and you tell the spaghetti story, the folks watching right now can go, I was there when that one was born.
Yeah. Well, okay. So, God dang. Anyway, well, okay.
I think this is, you know what? We can wrap this now. Just let's talk a little bit just about what folks are going to see tonight. Thank goodness. Again, back to these times, not to make light of any of it or the real struggles. And boy, we would much rather be standing up on stage and hearing laughter in real time, even if the laughter is at our own expense. But we're also fortunate that in this time, you and I can visit like this, imperfect, and that you can perform and record it and share it. So maybe just in closing, share a couple of thoughts about what folks are seeing from you tonight.
Well, this was actually a really great opportunity to tell stories that work better in this form than on stage. What I wanted to do was there's a performance element to the stage where trying to hit the back of the house sometimes. You want to, you want to make it an experience that is personal, but also, your energy needs to fill a room. And one of the things that I'm really actually learning and actually surprisingly enjoying about Zooming and working in this form is that you can really get intimate in different stories. So I purposely picked some stories that I rarely, and there's a couple of them that I've never told, because I can really get intimate and close and just talk to people like I'm talking to a person. So there's a couple of stories about, and talk about going wrong. Almost now that we mention it, almost every one of these stories is something that kind of does go south a little bit. And a lot of them are holiday stories. There's a couple of heart tuggers, but mostly it's a fun night. It's a humorous night. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to looking at them, because I did them, but now I've shipped them off, and but I feel really good, and I can't wait.
Well, thanks for sharing your art with us, Kevin, and thanks too for putting up with this interview that kind of went off the rails, came back up, and really went off again.
A couple of times. I got to tell you, and I don't know if this is going to end up in the thing, but when we were talking about things going wrong, okay, when you're with your pals, right? You always talk, like you're saying, about, when things go awry. So that guy was talking about Bill Lepp. He's got my favorite one. He said he was at a senior facility one time performing, and two people showed up. One guy was on oxygen. He was in the third row, and he immediately fell asleep. And then there was a woman in the second row, and he just got started. And she decided she did not like him. She didn't like him. He wasn't her cup of tea. So she decided to leave. Well, she wasn't strong enough to open the door. So Bill had to go over and help her walk out of his show.
That's full service right there. Oh, yeah. Well, I wonder if she tipped him.
I don't know if he looked back. I think that's the kind you just put your car in gear.
Well, Kevin, thanks a lot. It's good to talk to you. And
you too, Michael.
See you down the road. All right. Take care.
I'm looking forward to it.
Can you order takeout tonight, or
what's that?
Are you living somewhere you can order takeout tonight, or?
No, I'm going back in, man. I'm not done.
It's a salvage project.
I have another can of tomatoes. It's not getting out of it that easy.
We'll see you later.
Thank you. Bye. getting ready to settle in for a long winter's nap. But before I do, I want to be sure to thank Ed for that amazing music tonight. Oh man, Ed, you're something. Thank you. And also to Tiny Tent and to all out there who joined in tonight. Thank you. I remember a few years ago I was in Thailand and I was working on a production of A Christmas Carol. They picked it. I said, you guys, A Christmas Carol, you're Buddhist. And they said, no, it's not about Christmas. They said, it's about karma. Good versus evil and greed versus generosity. I said, yeah, I guess you're kind of right. I go, but do you guys even know about how we celebrate Christmas? Oh, we know all about Christmas. You sit around looking at a dead tree and eat candy out of old socks. I say, okay, yeah, I guess we do. I guess that seems like it. So I was thinking about Christmas Carol. And I remember when I was a kid, we went to a production. There's a big theater here in town that would do the Christmas Carol once a year. And I remember going and it was amazing. The first scene was this whole British London in the morning, and then there came Scrooge, and he came into his office and he laid into his poor assistant Bob Cratchit. And then the second scene, he was at home and he was going to bed that night, and he had on his night robe and his hat, and he crawled into his snuggly sheets when all of a sudden smoke started pouring out of his grates in his floor like his furnace had blown, and then more fog came pouring in, and then in comes this ghost, and he says it's Jacob Marley. It was Scrooge's old assistant, and he's screaming, Marley, Marley, clearly in pain, and he's dragging these chains and these shackles that he had to drag for the rest of life, for the eternity, from the horrors he had done in life, and he warns Scrooge he better change his ways, and then he goes to leave Marley when one of his chains snags on the grate in the floor, and Marley can't get the chain free, and he's pulling and pulling. Well, Scrooge can't see it, so he keeps going with the dialogue, and when he runs out of script, he starts, well, Marley, old friend, isn't it about time you make your way to the bowels of hell to join the other demons? And he's looking at his watch. Well, Marley keeps saying, Marley. He's one of those professional actors that figures if the playwright would have meant it, he would have wrote it, and so he's sticking with Marley, Marley. But he uses his line to help explain the situation. Marley, 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 Marley. And Scrooge finally looks down. Well, how the heck did you do that? And he comes in, no, you're making it worse. And they start pulling, 1, 2, 3, Marley, 1, 2, 3, Marley. Well, all of a sudden the front door opens and in comes this orange salesman from the first scene. And he's got 2 assistants with him dressed in black, kind of like ninjas. And the orange salesman says, hello, governor. How may I help you? Maybe I can be of some service. And he comes walking in, and then the 2 ninjas take this sheet and put it over Marley in the grate in the floor, and the ninja goes behind it, or the orange salesman puts on this eye protection and goes behind it. And then we hear the starting of this saw, and Marley and Scrooge are standing there looking like somebody is finally repairing the furnace. And all of a sudden we hear this broing, and Marley, 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 and he runs off stage, Marley. Well, the orange salesman comes out, and the audience bursts into applause. So he takes the hands of the 2 ninjas, and they bow. And then they get Scrooge over there, and all 4 of them bow. It's the first time in my whole life that I ever saw a standing ovation halfway through the first act. In fact, the guy next to me goes, do they do this every night? And I go, I don't know, I guess they do. Well, the vegetable salesman and the 2 ninjas go arm in arm off stage like drunken cats, and leaving Scrooge to ponder of the horrors that he has just seen, which he did. I mean, he was a professional after all. So I was thinking of this, and I remember being up in Washburn a while back, and this woman was saying, in the newspaper, she said that her washing machine was haunted, that in the middle of the night, 2 in the morning, it would come on all by itself. She figured it was haunted. Well, in the same article, her next door neighbor said, no, her washing machine isn't haunted. She said, at that same exact time, I saw a UFO over their house. So that was it. And I was thinking about ghosts at Christmas time, how we have these ghosts, things that go bump in our hearts and minds, these chairs that sit empty at tables that once held uncles and aunts that now hold nieces and nephews. I remember years ago, I was at Signs of Intelligent Life in the Universe. It was a play by Lily Tomlin, a one-woman play on Broadway. And in the play, she invites these aliens over to watch her play. And the next day she runs into him and she says, "What did you think of my play?" And the alien said, "Oh, it was incredible. One of the best things we've ever seen. All those actors were just amazing." And she goes, "Wait a minute. I'm the only actor in the play." "Oh, no, no." She said, "All those hundreds of actors were so good." And then Lily Tomlin realized they'd been facing the wrong way. They thought the audience was the show. And I started thinking of this ghost that I met up in northern Minnesota. Okay, I'm working at Rutgers Lodge at the Paul Bunyan Playhouse. And there was a ghost there. Almost everyone had seen it. In fact, I saw it. He was standing next to me when I was watching the play, and when I turned, he was gone. So I asked people, and everyone had seen this ghost. In fact, the mayor of the town had seen the ghost. I was on the radio with him one time, and just to dig into it, I said, "Hey, Ned, what about that ghost?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, I've seen it." Well, after the radio show, I felt so bad. I said, "Ned, I'm really sorry that I said that. I mean, I brought up that you'd seen a ghost. I hope that doesn't cost you votes." "Oh, no," he said. "More people in town have seen that ghost than not. You probably got me some votes." So the theater decides to bring in this ghost writer to talk to this ghost, this guy named Gary. And Gary had this assistant on the other side of the world. Her name was Betty. And Betty would talk to the ghost and then report back to Gary, and he would write down what the ghost said. So Gary was sitting there with a yellow legal pad, and his hand is just moving up and down. And he's talking to me while his hand just keeps moving, and Betty keeps writing. And finally, Gary gets done, and he goes through and he crosses T's and dots I's and finds punctuation. And then he starts to read. And it turns out this ghost, his name is Dave. And Dave was hit by probably a drunk driver, but he was hit out in front of Rutgers Lodge where the theater was. And he said his spirit flew into the nearest place it could find. And Gary turned to me and said, "You know, that really does happen, is that when a spirit flees a body, it will run into the next tree or building that it can find." And so Dave said that he went into this building and he said his life changed on that day. All of a sudden, he was meeting kings and queens. He was seeing heroes and great lovers. He said, and sometimes even normal people will just burst into song. He said, "It's incredible." Gary turns to me and says, I don't think Dave knows that he's in a theater." And I said, "I don't think he does either. Let's not tell him." And he goes, no, let's not tell him." And so Dave keeps talking, and he says, "I know that it's soon for me to pass on, to go into the next world, but I'm having so much fun in life. Please just allow me a little bit more time and I'll go. And I promise I won't hurt anyone." So Gary approached the theater the next day, and everyone voted to let Dave stay. And every so often, people still see Dave sitting there watching these amazing events unfold. And I started thinking about us all, when we have times that we gather, how we come into the theater or the big top and we're given a much needed laugh or a cry, or somebody who's struggling knows that they're not alone. And all of a sudden, we realize we are the kings and queens. We are the heroes. We are the great lovers. Those are us. Like Shakespeare said, the lunatic, the lover, and the poet are in imagination all one. It's like the alien said, we really are the show. It's just the people on stage serve as reminders. And so I'm thinking about this time when we can gather again and get together in theaters and music halls and under the big top. And I'm so excited to be with you all again on those days when the princess gets the frog and the devil gets his due, and our imaginations are just a little bit better than our memories. Thank you and good night.
folks, that's our Tiny 10 show for tonight. Thank you to Kevin Kling for his stories. I'm sorry about his dinner. I don't know. Hey, what part of Wisconsin are you from? Is it supper or is it dinner? For another discussion. Thank you, Kevin Kling, and thank you to you for listening, and thank you to our sponsors. Jim and Joy Perry, Florio Wealth Advisors, Von Holtzen Chevrolet Buick GMC, Paucus Law, Anna Biermeyer and Roger Hansen, Ringenberg Financial Group, Mary Lou and Pat Irvine, Peggy and Ed Callahan, Roger and Sharon Shaver. If you can join these sponsors, again, I hope you'll take the opportunity to do so. There is a virtual tip jar up right now, and again, you can always contact the Lake Superior Big Top Chautauqua offices and make an official donation. Well, they're all official, but make a donation through official channels, I guess, is what I would say. We're grateful to you for supporting these Tiny 10 shows and tuning in. As I just proved, we do them close to the earth and in real time, and from the heart. So we're very grateful to have you. I hope that you're taking good care of yourself. I hope you're taking care of your neighbors and they're taking care of you. In the meantime, I don't want to say goodbye. I don't want to bid you adieu. I would just like to say what we said back there where I come from growing up. Well, I suppose. Forward.